Hello everybody and welcome to Case Management Practice 2 Assessment 2C. Okay, oh dear, Assessment 2C. In this assessment we will be looking at the third of our week 9 assessments, part C, and we're going to start out, we should start as always, go to the assessment templates document area here. Download the assessment template document area here, assessments 2C, and we've got that open here. Here it is, part C, and just complete the answers in the boxes. Obviously, start with your student name, the student number, and change the file name to your name as well, and record that so you don't lose your information. And we're going to start with question 1. List 2 key stakeholders who would receive a copy of this plan. So we're talking about the case plan, and you're thinking about the case plan, and this comes along with the case plan. These are all part of this week. So you've got the assessment and the case plans coming together. Who would receive a copy? Well, who's the 2 key stakeholders? There are only 2, really. The case manager is one, but the most important stakeholder of any list of stakeholders that you'll ever hear will be the client. Never forget the client is a key stakeholder. That's all. 2. Don't list anyone else. Do not list all the teachers, etc., etc., etc. Don't list people who are not privy to all the information. So somebody might be a manager, a support worker from an agency, say drug and alcohol counsellor or whatever, something like that. They don't get the full case plan. They only get their information to work on in the case plan. They're not privy to everything. You're the case manager, so you only ever give out that information which is relevant at the time to do the job, and that's all you give out. And you need to really consider that as a reason for sharing information. You need to get permission to do that. It's a need-to-know basis, and it's a very restricted person, a very restricted response to that. So we're going to list 2 key stakeholders, the client and the case manager. Outline steps you would take with each family member to engage them in developing their own case plan. Well, what steps would you take? You would provide them with an understanding of what the goals are that they've identified in the assessment. You work with them. You can help them consider options, and then you would agree with them that they agree to participate under certain conditions to complete their options. And that's the kind of list you make. And here's what you do. So with Lily, for example, you'd say, Lily, you've identified you've got an alcohol and drugs problem. I can give you a link to this alcohol and drugs service. Are you willing to work with them once a week, go and meet with them, sit down, talk to their counsellors, and try and help you to address some drug and alcohol problems? And she says, yes, I am. Then you go, that's part of the case plan. She's agreed to that. You write that in. And that's, so you've got the goal, address AOD. You've got the strategy, meet with the AOD worker. You've got the monitoring time once a week. And you've got Lily is agreeing to do this. And so that's the outline you would take. So each family member, so with children as well, they need to agree as well. You don't go out much. Do you want to go to the local youth service? And maybe you'll meet some friends and you can play some video games and stuff. You might not have video games at home. How does that sound? No, I don't want to go. I feel a bit, I feel very shy around other people. Okay, that's their choice. Don't write it in a plan if they don't agree to it. So you would go and do it only with their agreement. Give them the options, allow them to make choices. And then if they're not addressing their goals, you don't necessarily, unless it's urgent, you don't really need to address everything all at once. Again, we don't want to give service fatigue by sending people to too many services all at one time. Number 3, identify barriers to goal achievement that might exist and how you'll work with the clients and service providers to assist you in identifying the barriers. Well, barriers might be Lily's willingness to accept that there are needs. And you need to talk to Lily and confirm with Lily that she's in a situation where she has a potential of losing custody of her children. So you would work with Lily by identifying what the needs of her family are, reminding her of her responsibilities in order to the family, and also reminding her that There are consequences to her not addressing those responsibilities. That's the answer here. Describe what you would say to explain your role to the client. Well, this is a very formal thing, and it's a very difficult thing to do, because you say, you're the case manager, you're not child protection workers, but you do have a duty of care to the children. So you might say, for example, Lily, I'm here to help work with you to help identify services that you can access in order to ensure your family are supported and well resourced. And we want to help your family to grow as a family, but be aware that I'm also here as a duty of care with your children. And if I believe you're not working with your children and supporting your children correctly, then I have a responsibility to report that too. And if that's the case, there's a likelihood you might lose custody of your children. That is the words you need to say. So you have to remind Lily of the goals that are identified in the assessment, her responsibilities and consequences for her not meeting her responsibilities, and your willingness to help her where she's willing to help herself. But there's responsibilities on both sides, and that needs to be made very clear. Describe the importance of interagency protocols and guidelines in developing the client plans and outline how you would do this. So interagency protocols. So what are the protocols of your agency and what are the protocols of other agency? Protocols, they mean how do you plan to work together? So you define who is the primary case manager here. Are you the primary case manager, or would, for example, a child protection service be the primary case manager? And you decide on who's going to do what roles. So child protection might focus on child protection only. You might focus on providing other brokerage case management skills for Lily. So you might say, I'll help go and get some material aid. And they'll go, we'll monitor the children every week and sit down and interview the children and link them in with a child psychologist that we work with. So for example, like that. So describe how you would do that. You would negotiate primary case management responsibilities and ancillary case management responsibilities amongst the agencies and define how they will work with the client within the needs of the case plan. Okay, number 6. Considering the 3 service providers you've identified, so this is way back in the assessment 1 where it says identify 3 service providers that you might work with. Sorry, in your agency for, it might actually be assessment 2A. In assessment 2A, what 3 agencies might you work with here to work with Lily and her family? Considering 3 service providers you identified, discuss how you will negotiate a service agreement. Well, you sit down in a case conference and you agree on terms and responsibilities. Have a case conference. That's the answer. You could do it by phone. You can have a conference call. You could do it individually. You can do it one at a time. You can do it all together. But you, again, ring them up, just agree on the responsibilities for supporting the client. Number 7, how would you ensure all client information is kept confidential in line with the organisation policy and legislation? Identify which specific legislation this refers to. So, all client information is kept confidential and in line. Now, so there's 2 things. Confidentiality is the ethical responsibility to not talk about things. So you would keep all information, all spoken information between yourself and the relevant parties, and only share information where written agreement is made. There's privacy, which is the storage of information, which you need to store in filing cabinets, etc., like that. Locked databases, password protected, encrypted databases, and then you need to also identify the 2011 Privacy Act, which governs that, or it might not be 2011, it might be 2009. See, you have to go online and look, find out which is the applicable law of privacy in Australia. It is a federal law. Have a look at the Office of Australian Information Commissioner website. They will be able to tell you there's an organisation which protects the privacy of individuals in Australia, and if you're unhappy about your information being leaked, or if your clients are, they have the responsibility of the right to go there, and your organisation is responsible to go and report to them if they've been reported. Okay, number 8, discuss how you would need to adjust your communication styles with each of your clients. So with Lily, you might need to hire an interpreter. You would use simple, plain, non-technical language to help her understand. Don't use terms like case manager, case management. Don't use any of these brokerage model. We're not going to use any of that language. It's technical jargon that will not help the client understand what you are. So you have to learn to use very plain, basic terms. I'm here to work with you to help you find some services that you can access. You need to do that through an interpreter if they don't understand. And with Lily, you would alter your communication style based on how she's responding. So if she's refusing to accept information, you might need to be a little bit more aggressive and say, and remind her of consequences if she is not willing to participate. Being aggressive doesn't mean being rude. It means being more assertive about, actually the word is assertive, not aggressive, being more assertive about what you're saying to her that she understands. There are consequences to her actions. For the children, they're 2 clients that you have as well. So you've got 3 clients here. The children, you need a specific response. You will be failed if you don't give it. Again, you use even more simple language and you modify that and you make it clear and you make it easy, and you talk about that 2 children under the age of 10. So you're talking about things in rights and wrongs. You're not going to talk about grey areas. We're here to help you. We want to know what you want. Do you like this? You don't like this. If you don't like this, you tell me you don't like this. Use very simple language. And in some cases, you would not say everything. You wouldn't say, if you tell me that you've been abused, we will remove you from your children, your family. You'd never say words like that. So that gets interpreted as, I'll never see my mum again if I tell you about abuse. You never want to say those sorts of things. So you modify it by using child-friendly language. And that's what you say there. Number 9, identify and describe what legislation refers to child protection and how is abuse defined under this legislation. Right. So we're going into your, or let's go back to the documents here. We're going to go back to where we were working with this information. In here, I'm going to week 1. All the information you need about child protection legislation is in week 1. This is very important that you review this. Case management, key principles guiding legislation. There. Definitions of children in need of protection. 1. Key principles. Definitions. These are the definitions. Maltreatment, physical abusive behavior, sexual abusive behavior, negative behavior, psychological behavior, exposure to family violence. Reviewing legal frameworks. There's the legal frameworks. You might want to cite those legal, go and find some legal frameworks. Google legal frameworks, child protection, and write your answers into here. Identify and describe legislation. Say the legal frameworks. Where's go? Australia Child Protection Act. Google it. Add it there and list in maltreatment, sexual abuse, physical abuse, emotional abuse, neglect, failure to provide medical care, exposure to domestic violence. Number 10, identify what are the indicators of harm in this case study and how this is defined in legislation. The indicators of harm for the children are their exposure to domestic violence, potential for emotional abuse through verbal assaults, yelling and screaming, physical abuse, potential with physical abuse and potentially sexual abuse through parties, that sort of thing. So put those information down here. They're the indicators of harm and they're defined in the legislation of the Child Protection Act. Okay. Identify state and federal courts which may become involved in this. Well, family court, state family court and state federal court if there is an issue which becomes more federal than state, and if families try to escape across to different states, if they remove themselves from an area where a state child protection services is involved with them and they say, well, in order to escape this, we're just going to jump in the car and go and live with our cousin in Queensland. That way nobody will get us, and it's way out in the country. Well, maybe federal courts need to be involved because the case is now federal, or some other matter in regards to legislation, which could be fairly complex. We can't talk about it now. 12. Describe 2 theories of child vulnerability and resilience. Okay, let's go back into our case, into our book here. Week 1 introduction, we don't want to do that. Week 1 case management. No, we don't want to do that. Let's get rid of that. We're back here. We're in week 2. Go to week 2. Now, there's extra reading resources in here. Open the tab for extra reading resources. Once again, here in case 2. And here we will find theories that you can use. And there's 2 things you need to think about here. You're going to get asked for 2 sets of theories. One, there's the elder abuse again from the first thing. Mandatory reporting, life plan education, child protection standards, information record, child development theories outline, child development and well-being, final, child safety officer, risk of harm. And as we go into the book as well, resilience, there are a number of documents here. How there's dominant theories of child development. So you'd be focusing primarily on people like Erik Erikson. And here we have Piaget and Erikson, child development, and understanding children's reaction to trauma in development stages growing up here. So there's some resilience issues. How are children affected? How can they be resilient? And there is also another document which I can't seem to find. It might be How Children Manage Abuse. It might be in here. Further understanding to identify, and Alan Shaw on resilience, he'll talk about some theories. And also, you can Google this. You can Google this situation here. And is there extra videos, reading resources at the end, which can also give you some information. Victims of sexual abuse, linking Erikson and understanding basic elements of standards, negative effects on growth, childhood development, Vygotsky's stages of childhood development, and Alan Shaw, again, he's excellent here in talking about resilience and trauma. And if that's not enough, you can always Google child abuse and resilience theories. Okay, so we've got that. Okay, so back to our page over here. Describe 2 theories of child vulnerability and resilience. Go get that information. Identify stage of child development. We've got those 2 questions answered by looking in week 2 and finding information out there if you've forgotten. Outline the key implications of the document assessment and plans in relation to children at risk. Legal implications are this. You're writing legal documents. They have to be accurate. They have to be ethically managed, and they have to be up to date, and they have to be thorough. So, for example, here's what happens. If you don't write down there's a risk of a child, I don't know, potentially being thrown off a balcony at a party, for example. You say worried about child's health and safety in a party, and then there's evidence lots of parties occur in the house, and then the child is thrown off the balcony. They'll go, why did you not see there was a lot of parties? You didn't talk about that. You were given that information. Did you not determine that as a risk element, you were meant to write that down? So as these are, the legal implications are, they are legal documents, and they can affect your career. That's the answer to this, that you could lose your job and your career. And in England, they have huge issues around this with certain, there's one council where this is a case study in point, where workers have failed to get any work for 10 years after failing in their duties. So these legal documents are very important responsibility statements that you have. And number 15, describe how you would employ the services of an interpreter to assist with your communication with Lily? Well, you would employ the services of an interpreter by Googling interpreting services, finding interpreting services that you would use. You might use them on telephone, you might use them face-to-face, you might use them to translate documents into language that can be understood, and you would use them as and when you needed to use them to ensure that Lily 100% understood legal issues here, because it's your responsibility ethically and as a duty of care to help Lily understand her parenting role, to try and keep the family together as much as possible. If you say, I told you to go and see an AOD worker in English and she didn't understand, and then you say, now we're looking for to have the children removed, you go to court and she said, no one told me, I only speak Chinese. And they go, did you get an interpreter? You say, no. They say, sorry, we're going to have to go back through this whole process again. So this is why you need to follow a process. And finally, number 16. Following a referral, you commented. Remember way back in the assessment, it says Lily never told you she already had an alcohol and drug worker. Well, it says now you've doubled up. Now you've got 2. Discuss how you might manage the service duplication, facilitate between the various service providers. Well, how do you decide which one to go to? You don't, do you? Lily does. Ask Lily, what does she prefer? She shouldn't have to give her information to everybody that you trot through her house. That's hardly fair. So if she's already given all this personal detail to somebody, and then again, she might not find this being effective. So she might say, I'll choose to work with the new one. But she might prefer the old one. Why is it not her choice? And if it might not be her choice if you say, look, you've worked with these people for 10 years and clearly you're still using substances. So it's not working for you, is it? Why don't you try something else? So you could try that approach too, but it would be a negotiation between you and Lily as to which one she prefers and which one's going to be most effective in working with her. Right, that's the end of this assessment. Well done, guys. Send this in by the end of week 9, and we look forward to seeing you in the next recording. Take care. Bye.